And since object permanence is the worst enemy of the propaganda system, well, at least one of the worst enemies, it's worth remembering certain things because we're bound to hear all sorts of shit, we always do, about how Iran is a madman regime and all this sort of thing. If anyone in these long 20 months of genocide in Gaza has been actually really committed to de-escalating things, to avoiding turning this into some sort of major regional war, or possibly something bigger than that, it has been Iran. Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. And wow, it's been a fucking week, hasn't it? I probably would do better numbers if I didn't swear this early in the stream, and yet I cannot not, because just the amount of shit that's just constantly going on. Israel and the U.S. have decided to just start an all-out war with Iran. I can't really not mention that. And since object permanence is the worst enemy of the propaganda system, well, at least one of the worst enemies, it's worth remembering certain things because we're bound to hear all sorts of shit, we always do, about how Iran is a madman regime and all this sort of thing. How they're just crazy. All sorts of racist and ableist and very orientalist bullshit that is meant to make us think that they're erratic and unpredictable and belligerent, and as if they were the ones who were doing all of the threatening and attacking in the Middle East and not, say, the U.S. And here's a thing we absolutely should remember, because I don't think that we're going to see a lot of, Western media outlets, certainly not in the U.S., pointing this out. But if anyone in these long 20 months of genocide in Gaza has been actually really committed to de-escalating things, to avoiding turning this into some sort of major regional war, or possibly something bigger than that, it has been Iran. That is just a fact. I mean, let's just look, since it's often, the chronology is often reversed on these things, let's just remember, Israel attacked Iran back in 2024. They attacked, it was in a fractally illegal operation. It was illegal on multiple levels. They attacked the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And Iran's response was first to go to the Security Council, send them a letter, and say, we want to give you, I think it was a week's time to deal with this issue and respond appropriately. And if you do, we will consider the matter closed. And if you don't, then we will have to take action. Because obviously, especially with the way Israel and the U.S. are acting at the moment, you can't just take that, or they'll just start doing more and more. And so the Security Council, with the U.S. veto, did not do shit. And so Iran had an operation that they called True Promise 1, which was extremely limited. I mean, it's been described as mostly an intelligence gathering operation to see what the U.S. and Israel would do in response. And in that sense, you could say it was quite successful. But all they did, they fired mostly extremely cheap drones that were designed to just be destroyed. And they landed a few shots on Israeli military bases, and then they said they'd consider it closed. And then Israel, since Israel feels entitled not just to be the aggressor, but also to act aggrieved when the consequences of their actions show up come around to bite them. Said that they had to respond, and so they responded, and their response was actually they attacked. They had an attack on Tehran. Mostly it was a failure, but they did assassinate, among other things, Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of the political bureau of Hamas and the elected prime minister of the occupied Palestinian territory, to the extent that anyone can claim the office. Although, since Israel and the U.S. haven't allowed elections since 2006, I mean, it's not really clear whether anyone can claim the office. But he was the last person to have been elected to it. And Iran responded with, again, first of all, a letter to the Security Council saying, deal with this, and we'll consider it over. But if you don't, we'll have to take matters into our own hands. And they did. And again, it was an extremely limited, one-off operation targeting very specific military targets. There were basically no casualties. That time there was exactly one civilian casualty, and that was the result of the puppet Air Force of Jordan shooting down one of Iran's missiles over the occupied West Bank, and it killed a Palestinian from Gaza, apparently, there. But if it had been allowed to actually go to its target, it would not have hit that. It would have not have done that. But in any case, and then Iran said, we consider this closed. And Israel actually carried out more attacks after that, and they said, we will respond at a time and place of our choosing, which has become like a meme amongst politicians in the U.S. Ever since Iran said that, now all sorts of politicians in the U.S. say it, often very pathetically, like when Hakeem Jeffries says that in response to a senator being just illegally arrested for asking a question at a press conference. And then they didn't really do anything. They said for a while, the wait is going to be part of the punishment, but then they didn't really do much. They decided, and in parallel to that, they did enter into continued discussions with the U.S. In fact, appeasing the U.S., trying to reach some sort of agreement with the U.S., despite the U.S. not really respecting the agreements that it signs, and the fact that the U.S. was demanding things that Iran had absolutely no obligation to give, and that the U.S. had no right to demand. They were very much the de-escalating factor compared to an extremely aggressive and just utterly out of control U.S.-Israel duo, who really do seem to be just trying to find out what they have to do in order to trigger a full-on regional war. And now it looks like they, at the very least, they know what they need to do to trigger a full-on response from Iran. I've been trying to keep tabs on that to the extent that military censorship in Israel permits, because they don't want the general public there to realize the extent of the damage and the places that are being targeted, because at a certain point, they might say that this actually starting a war with Iran might be a bad idea, and they don't want that. But, yeah, so at the same time, this is just another chapter in this sort of just self-destruction of Israel, because this isn't going to help them in the long run, no matter what domestic political conflicts it helps them paper over in the short run.